So we have a couple different types of mics that we can use. We can have ceiling or hanging mics. So these mics are the issues that it's closer to the speaker, so we have to be aware of that. Usually it's better for aesthetics because we don't have mics on the table. So you can see there's pros and cons. For table mics, it's the opposite. It's closer to a participant. So remember the factor of the source to the mic distance. This closes the distance a lot, but it's not always ideal for aesthetics, and it can be a requirement that the client doesn't want the table to be like cluttered with mics and other things because they might have they want a very clean aesthetic. But if you use like ceiling or hanging mics, definitely go for directional mics. Omnidirectional mics might pick up things that you don't want to, like speakers that are very close by. So we don't want that. So directional mics are always recommended. So before I move to solutions, if you have any questions, you can direct them to the question and answer tab. If you have any questions so far, you're not sure of certain concepts of voice lift, because it's using basically the same equipment, but quite a different application and like solution for like your typical meeting room, conference room, or classroom solutions. So if you have any questions, please direct them to the question and answer. Any other things you want to talk to us about, just direct them to the chat. So let me open up the chat, and anything either myself or my colleagues will answer you. So let me move on to the solutions. So the first solution we have here is our meeting or conference room. So of course, the first thing we ask is voice lift appropriate here? So we go through the same factors, the same key concepts that we've gone through before, which is the room big enough? We have to consider acoustics. Is ambient noise very high? So all these things are can be done with a side recce. You can check if the noise is high, if the room is really too reflective. You have trouble hearing each other, but not because of the size of the room, but because of acoustics. If that's the case, voice lift might not be appropriate. Something about voice lift is not like a normal, like a two-speaker thing that you put there, and if it's not appropriate, it will somehow work. No, that's not the case with voice lift. If it's not appropriate, it will be very ineffective, and the issue is that the client won't see the benefit for how much effort and budget they have paid for this system. So voice lift, definitely don't force this when it's not needed, when it's not applicable to a space. So some of the common issues we have with meetings and conference rooms. So multi-way dialogue cannot be heard when there's discussion. You have maybe 10, 20 people around. You can't hear each other, and normal like conferencing, maybe you have a few mics, not too many mics. So with voice lift, you have one mic per person, and you have an array of speakers located above the participants, so that the both the pickup and also the output is very linear. So with larger rooms, you have much less clarity and volume as you get from the nearest speaker to the, or rather the nearest participant to the furthest participant. Traditional systems might not be ideal with multiple open mics, and in conference rooms, maybe there's a lack of space to mount speakers like line array or surface mount. So any other restrictions, like I mentioned before, perhaps they don't allow table mics. They want the mics to be hung or in the ceiling. So we have to consider all these restrictions before we can come up with a solution. So what kind of solution can we come up with? So usually for conference rooms, pendant or ceiling speakers can be mounted out the way. If they don't have space to mount a ceiling speaker, we can always go with pendant. Nowadays, lots of workspaces do away with false ceiling, so that We have pendant mounts available, so you can install them onto your ceiling speakers and then you can hang them down. So we have our Dan Dugan auto mixer. This reduces the number of open mics to 1 because it's gain sharing. We definitely have to use our zoning functions in our MRX7D feedback suppressor. And what do we have? So we have 1 mic per person. So this is a very simple like visual representation of how the setup will look like. We have speakers to cover. So we have speakers to cover around the meeting room or the meeting table. We are not trying to cover the center of the table. We are not trying to cover the front or the back. We are just trying to cover where people will be seated. So you can see that down here I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 speakers and 1 mic for each person. So this is quite a lot more speakers than what you use with a regular meeting room solution or conference room solution. So you can see here that we have 1 mic and quite a bit of speakers, 10 speakers around the room so that everyone can have even coverage. So how do we do our routing? We do our routing if, let's say for the second mic, you can see over here, just example is not routed to certain speakers. So this mic, because it's sitting in between the coverage of the first 2 speakers, we don't route it to our speaker 1 and speaker 2 so that the mic to the nearest speaker distance, instead of being from here to here, it's here to all the way here. So we effectively, maybe not double, but we effectively increase the distance from mic to speaker. For those that have done installs before, if the mic is just below the speaker, you can imagine how much feedback and issues that you may have. So this is quite important when you are dealing with this kind of setup. If we have a existing system, or if the client wants to install something that like this, like a 2 speaker in the front kind of deal. So if they have different uses for the meeting or conference room, still can have that in our MRX. It has enough channel count and processing to also integrate that. So we can either turn off all the ceiling speakers when it's in this mode. So we can have a voice lift mode and a regular meeting mode. We can utilize the mics, or maybe for UC or VC purposes, we can have something like our YVC 1000. There might be less people in this meeting rather than maybe in a VC or UC kind of setting, there might be half the amount of people. So the YVC 1000 can clearly pick up something, the conversation along the entire table. So we can definitely integrate something like that along with a voice lift system, so there is no issue. So the results of that, so you can integrate with our UC systems or video conferencing. And also Dante can be used with existing systems. If it's analog, there should be no issue. And of course, meetings are more productive because everyone can hear each other. If we are doing video conferencing, AEC function is essential and can be used. So there is a function that's in the MRX7D. And of course, hands-free. So if you're using ceiling mics, ceiling speakers, the table is very clean. They are free to do whatever they want on the table. So they have laptops, notes there. They don't need to worry about pressing on-off button on their boundary mic or their gooseneck mics. So meetings are hands-free. They don't need to toggle with technology too much. But if they do want, it's possible to have a simple digital control panel there for them to just change to different modes, toggle different presets, something very simple that's done at the start of the use of the room. And then it's just set and forget until they use it next time. They can just toggle that again. So control is variable. So you can have simple control, no control at all, or you can have more advanced control if they want. So next solution we have is a smart classroom, or maybe a lecture hall type of place. So again, we ask ourselves, is voice lift appropriate here? The answer is yes. We try to find what the common issues are. So again, we can't hear discussion. We can't hear dialogue between the teacher and the participant, the students. There's usually a lack of coverage towards the back. So lecture halls are usually sloped. And because there's a restriction on where things can be mounted, on the front of the hall. Usually it doesn't cover very well towards the back, 2-3 rows, depending on the size of the hall. So the mic is oftentimes in front of the speaker. So speakers are mounted on the rear wall with the lecturer or the teacher standing in front of the speaker. So depending on where they walk, it can be quite feedback inducing. So if they walk towards the left or right, that happens to be in front of the speaker with an omnidirectional lapel mic, you can have quite a bit of feedback issues. So you have to manage that. So those are the common issues we have with classrooms or smaller lecture halls. So what solutions can we give? So we can install ceiling mics, ceiling speakers, of course, with maximum overlap for the student area. We use our zoning and auto mixer. So this time, auto mixer, we can have a priority setting for the teacher. So this will duck down any other noise coming, or rather any other conversation coming from the student side. So the teacher will always have priority. We can have a simple DCP on the table for control. So just four switches and one knob for the control. We can be controlling levels or switching presets, something very simple. Of course, we can do Dante networking as well. So this can connect to other halls, other lecture rooms, other classrooms, and then connected to a central hub where maybe the chief technician can do any troubleshooting, firmware updates very remotely. They don't need to come down to the actual room and plug into the server rack. They can just do it from their office. So that is quite convenient. So again, we have ceiling speakers covering the entire hall. Of course, with the mic that the teacher has, it will not be fed into the speaker that is directly above. So maybe ceiling speakers ceiling mics can be mounted for the students, but the teacher can have a different kind of mic that is closer to the teacher, so more of that voice comes out. So of course, ceiling mics that are hung will not be routed. Signal from those mics will not be routed to the nearest speaker. So what results do we get? So we get clarity across the classroom or the hall. Discussion and participation is promoted. So we have better quality discussion. Everyone can hear each other. So if you're looking at settings where there is a lot of interaction, so that will be much more conducive towards learning, towards discussion and participation. It's aesthetically pleasing because there's nothing on the table. Most of the time it's not possible to put like mics on the table because of security reasons and also cabling and everything like that. Very convenient control for a teacher, simple as well. Very easy integration of external devices. So if we have speaker lines, analog speaker lines coming out, we can feed them into the MRX7. We can do speaker management or some kind of signal processing for that as well. So again, we can have different functions for the room. So we can have voice lift preset. We can have maybe if they use it for events, we can just use the speakers that are at the front. So no issue with that. All right, so come to the end of this voice lift presentation. I'll leave it to you guys to ask some questions around now and just input your questions. If you have any questions, any projects that you're unsure of, just let us know. You can ask the questions in the Q&A, and if there's anything more, you can take it out of this webinar. We can just you can email us as well if your questions need more like in-depth answer. So just shoot and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Anybody out there curious about, what this system can do, or if you've been to any venues that you're not sure of whether you should implement voice lift, just feel free to ask us. If not, you can just drop us a PM on the chat as well if you want to take this offline. All right, so we have a question coming in. How do we contact you if our company requires training on these Yamaha DSP systems? So you can contact us. Maybe you can leave our email in the chat, or maybe you can leave our number in the chat. If you need training, we can definitely discuss, and we can have training over Zoom, a Zoom meeting, or you can have in-person training if you have a need for like DSP systems. Might not be voice leave, can be any other system. So if you need our training, just contact us. Maybe you can leave our contact on the chat, and then you can let us know. Yeah. So if you have need for training on our DSP, so we have we have a series of MTX MRS DSP, a bunch of different speakers, different amplifiers. So you see a lot different speakers, ceiling mount, surface mount, column line array, subwoofers. They are all quite flexible. They're meant for different applications, all the way from like FMB to education, like lecture halls and stuff like that. So if you need product training or technical training, please let us know, and then we conduct these trainings quite often, but it's not public because usually it's by request only. So if you need, please let us know and we can arrange from there. Oh, and if you need to just look back at the webinars, I think on our YouTube channel, there are some of the older webinars. So I think we've done quite a few of these CIS sessions already. So there might be something like a product lineup run through and stuff like that on our YouTube. So you can look back. So if you remember seeing something before, can't remember, you can just look at our YouTube, see whether it's rewatch the webinar and see whether it's covered there. If arranging a training is a bit more leceh, you can just rewatch our webinars and see from there. If any other questions, feel free to contact us. No worries. So if there's no other questions, I'll end the webinar here. And if you are interested in our future webinars, feel free to like our Facebook and our Instagram here. So we update quite frequently on these platforms, especially Facebook. So if you want to keep updated with our webinars and our training sessions, please like and follow us so you can be the most updated and attend all future webinars and training sessions. So thanks for joining us. Hope to see you in the next webinar. So thank you.